We go from one stress to another, continually activating stress response.
I have left in the healing hands of my confessor.
What if the biggest thing holding you back is you? Not your boss, not your past, but a silent saboteur living inside your mind.
After every stressful experience, you have to have the awareness to say, let me give myself a couple-minute break. Appropriate breathing and relaxing can help restore some sense of balance. Whatever tasks you have, you're going to function better at them if you take the time to do this recovery.
Dr. Steven Sideroff is here to expose how your brain's survival system may be destroying your peace and how to take your power back.
People that I work with find that new relationships turn out to be just as painful as the old relationships, that the new people betray them just like the old people betrayed them. But of course, if they are similar, they're going to have the same.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Dr. Steven Sideroff. He is a professor at UCLA Geffen School of Medicine and has recently written a book called The 9 Pillars of Resilience. I'm really excited to have you on the show to learn more about resilience. I think it's something that a lot of men want, a lot of men talk about, a lot of men are kind of aiming towards, and yet we often don't know how to get there, or we weren't taught that growing up. So I'm excited to hear more about you, more about your story, and help our listeners out there build resilience. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Mark, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I really welcome this opportunity to share some of my experience and approaches to your audience.
Fantastic. So I want to start with the personal story, right? So how did you get into studying psychology or wanting to learn more about resilience? Is it rooted in your own history?
Well, I must say that my childhood was pretty positive, pretty good. So I started out with that blessing, so to speak. But, the challenges of early adulthood were the times that, on the one hand, had me wondering and wanting to know more about what causes our behavior, what causes our thinking, what's at the root of that. So for my own understanding, I started out my career in neuroscience, in brain and behavior, studying how the brain functions. But I quickly switched into clinical because I wanted to work with people. I wanted to help people really cope better with what's going on in their lives. And in that process, I quickly realized that stress was one of the primary modulators of how we feel and how successful we are. And it's the ability to handle the stresses in our lives that really makes a difference in how happy we are and how well we function. So right from the start, that was my focus, whether in the work of addiction that I've been in for many years, I realized that someone can overcome an addiction, but their vulnerability to relapse was directly connected to how well they dealt with stress, because stress creates greater craving, and that leads to relapse. So no matter what your background, stress is a primary modulator. And that led me down to the roads of realizing how, it's interesting. You think that we should be able to handle whatever comes up in our lives, learn about it, but we actually have some structural causes for failure in how we deal with stress. It's strange, but number one, we have a stress response that doesn't match the needs of our everyday life. So you're worrying about a bill to be paid, or you're worrying about a relationship, but your body mobilizes to either fight the danger or run from the danger. So there's a mismatch there where we're always overreacting to the stresses in our lives, creating physiological imbalance. We also have a developmental mismatch. We learn how to deal with the stresses in our life based on the models of our childhood, based on the lessons of our childhood, which for the most part don't serve us well as adults. So these are the sources of our disconnect in why we have chronic stress and stress overload, which then affects cognitive functioning and emotional and physical health. So it all funnels down for me into finding ways to help people become more resilient.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. You said a lot of great stuff there. I like how you highlighted the nature and nurture components of stress and how people can be more or less prone to stress, right, or not have coping mechanisms to deal with the stress. But I want to take you back a little bit and just ask you, what is stress? Because I think everyone knows it when they feel it. But, in my undergrad, I studied a lot of stress. I was doing mainly mindfulness studies, right, and meditation studies. So stress reduction was a big part of that. And we were looking at things like, resting heart rate or skin temperature or cortisol levels. But, I was in undergrad, 20 years ago. So I'm curious, how do you measure stress? What is kind of the physiological nature of stress? And yeah, I guess we'll start there. I got tons of other questions. But yeah, starting there, what is it really?
Right. So it's a good starting point. And stress is anything real or perceived or imagined or interpreted that is a threat, a danger that causes us to mobilize to deal with it. Anything that throws us off of our resting place. Okay, so as I said before, it could be looking at a bill and worrying if you're going to be able to pay it. It could be walking into a meeting where you're concerned about the judgments of others. It could be the loss of a relationship and worrying about what is going to be your next step. All of these, anything that presents a challenge to us is a source of our mobilizing to deal with that. And the mobilization is our stress response. And that's a total body reaction that's designed to prepare us, as I said before, to deal with either fighting or running from the danger. Now, here, as I said, was the first mismatch. Now, one of the things that I've learned in all my years of work is that people have tremendous resistance to dealing with their stress. Now, why do we have resistance to dealing with something that would really lead us to be healthier and happier? And that's because stress is not just bad. Stress and our stress response, in fact, I've redefined our stress response, which is the mobilization for better focus and better attention and persistence. And I've redefined it as a useful tool. But the key is finding your stress sweet spot, finding the level within which you function at your best. Now, I challenge you, Mark, if you think about all the successes in your life, I guarantee that they all or most of them have been associated with stress. So notice that our successes have been associated with stress. So our brain, one of my early mentors when I was a professor at McGill University in Montreal was Donald Hebb. And he was one of the pioneers in neuroscience. And he said, neurons that fire together, wire together. I'm sure you've heard that expression. And that's what happens in our brains. We've wired together stress and success. So unconsciously, we actually are designed to look for stress in our lives because of that connection. Okay? So therefore, stress is not just bad. It can be good. We embrace it, but we have to find our stress sweet spot. We have to realize that we can't just keep going. We have to recuperate and restore the resources used up during the activation of our stress response.
Right. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, stress is how we grow. If you look at things like muscular stress, right, that's how you build muscle, right? If you look at things like emotional stress, that's how you build resilience. So I like that idea that stress is a good thing and it could be really complicated. I want to ask you a question about chronic stress, because many of our listeners talk about that, where they feel like they're burnt out. They feel like they're living in a state of like being on edge. Again, if you looked at it scientifically, their cortisol levels are probably going to be through the roof if you were to take a, sampling. But what is that? I mean, do you think a lot of people in this country are in a state of chronic stress? Like they're not able to get rid of it, not able to really like cycle that through?
Absolutely. So those people that talk to you about that are not alone. Everybody I speak to will say, I have too much on my plate. Well, I have too much to do. There's too much needing to be done. And the speed of which things take place in and of itself is a source of stress. So chronic stress is a condition in which so we have two branches to our nervous system. The sympathetic activating branch, which activates to stress, and the parasympathetic recovery branch, that when we go into that parasympathetic, we restore the resources used up during the stress response. And so these two branches are designed to be in balance. But if you think about your day, and this is chronic stress, you recognize that you go from one stressful situation to another, that there are many stimuli in our day that trigger danger, threat, but how many stimuli do you have in your day that trigger safety, relax, I can let go? If you're like me, I don't have any in my day. I have to create them. I have to put them into my day. And that's the key, because we go from one stress to another, continually activating our stress response, stretching it until, we get some kind of a breakdown. And so just like a rubber band, that after you stretch it, you have to bring it into its relaxed state. The same thing is true for the stress response. To deal with chronic stress, after every stressful experience, you have to have the awareness to say, let me give myself a couple-minute break, even a 2-minute break. Appropriate breathing and relaxing can help restore some sense of balance. And that's the way that you approach chronic stress, is that you remember and find time to shift into the recovery mode.
Yeah, yes. I'm curious to say more about that, right? Because some of the clients that I work with, right, is like, they think they're relaxing, but really they're just procrastinating, which I think is creating more stress, right? So they might be, watching TV, or they might be, mucking around on the internet, or, some of them are drinking or drugging, right? They're doing things that are like delaying those stressful situations. But when they get honest, they are stressed during those relaxing activities as well, right? So it's not really helping. In fact, it's only negative, right? Because not only are they not getting their stuff done, they're also still kind of like jacking up their nervous system. So I think for a lot of men out there, like, we haven't experienced a lot of parasympathetic, truly. So I'm curious, other examples you might have, or, how does somebody know when they're in that type of nervous system, right? When they're functioning on that channel? Because I think it's foreign for a lot of guys out there.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And I see many people who will tell me that they'll take off a Sunday and they'll sit down in their backyard to relax, and they can't get their business out of their head, or they can't get a concern or a worry. And as long as your mind is going in those directions, you are not really engaging the recovery branch of your nervous system. And even if you sit down to watch TV, you're still not engaging the recovery branch. You're still staying in this activated state. We have, to a great degree, lost the ability to go to deeper places of calm. And we notice this because we have an epidemic of insomnia in our society, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep or really getting refreshed sleep at the end of the day. And that's because we've lost the ability to go to the deeper places of calm. There's no escaping the need to practice some form of relaxation, meditation, biofeedback, exercise, visualization that literally you retrain yourself to go to that deeper state of calm. Some of your audience never experienced this, even in childhood. If you have a childhood in which, your parents are judgmental and critical, you're on guard right from the start of your life, and you never really engage that parasympathetic recovery branch because you never really feel sufficiently safe to let down your guard. So people the first step is to recognize that if I'm always going in this direction with my nervous system, I have to do something to retrain myself to go in this direction. And so, I teach people literally a 2-minute relaxation process that I encourage people to do throughout the day. If you like, we can kind of go over that right now.
Yeah, let's do it. And listeners, you can follow along as he's talking.
Yeah, right. So the first key, the two keys in this process. One is that there's a breathing rate that fosters balance and recovery. And that breathing rate is around 6 breaths per minute. So it's about 4 seconds breathing in and about 6 seconds breathing out. And I emphasize the breathing out because when we breathe in, we actually stimulate the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. When we breathe out, we stimulate the parasympathetic recovery branch. And when we go into about 6 breaths per minute, a number of physiological systems in the body go into alignment. So let's do it now, and I'll bring in just a couple other concepts, and we'll do this in just 2 minutes. So if your audience can just take a moment to center yourself, tell yourself, I'm safe for the next 2 minutes, I could let down my guard. And when you do this in practice, you should do at least 5-10 minutes of it. And now when you breathe in, focus in on your heart. Imagine breathing in through your heart. And when you breathe out, imagine totally letting go, allow your body to sink or melt into the chair. Breathe in through your heart and let go of any tension in your body and release. And when you breathe in through your heart, I want you to focus in on a feeling of gratitude towards somebody in your life or yourself, a feeling of love and gratitude. Breathe in through your heart, love and gratitude. And on the exhale, just feel yourself totally letting go. Now, I bring in love and gratitude because research has demonstrated when we go into a positive emotional state, it facilitates this optimal physiological, we call it heart rate variability, and we call the optimal coherence. So continue breathing in through your heart and out, letting go. And when you do this, what begins to happen is as you breathe in, your heart rate goes up. As you breathe out, your heart rate slows down. And this is called coherence or optimal heart rate variability. And it's a key measure of physiological health and restoring balance between the two branches of your nervous system. So breathe in, gratitude. And as you breathe out, just allow your body to let go. And if you practice this on a regular basis, you will get better at it. So taking time to do it is actually an investment, because the more you do it, what happens is you can achieve better results in shorter periods of time as you get better at it.
Yeah, I feel a lot better just doing that with you. And I think, for the guys out there, it's like, try it, check out this stuff. I think it's critical to train this just like you would train at the gym. It is a skill that we have to build just like any other, especially if, like you said, you don't have a great childhood, if you were kind of on edge all the time, if you feel the fact that you're just wound up, if you've got feedback that you're kind of have a stick up your ass, right? This is great things to train. I'll also throw in there, mind-body exercise like yoga or Tai Chi or stretching, something like that, as well as meditation and mindfulness practice. Like, it is something that we have to learn. It doesn't just come naturally, even though you think it would, right? You think like relaxing would be normal and natural, but it's not, especially in our overstimulated society that we all live in.
Yeah, but so one other important key to this process, or any effort to restore balance, what happens with most of us is we get into that process, but then our brains start going with all our unfinished business. Oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. And it distracts us and actually impairs the ability of what you're doing to have any effect. So what I want to tell people in your audience is that whatever your goals are in life, whatever tasks you have, you're going to function better at them if you take the time to do this recovery. You're going to function better, you're going to think more clearly, you're going to be able to focus better. So it's an investment. So when you're doing this relaxation or any other kind, you set a wall between you and the things going on in your life just for that period of time. You set what I refer to as a zone of safety. And you fully engage in that process, because then it'll serve you the best.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. I like that you said that, right? Because I think a lot of guys are probably like, I'm too busy to do that. And it's like, well, one, it's 2 minutes. And 2, it's going to make you way more efficient overall. So thank you for underlying that. I want to pivot to the topic of resilience. So can you say a little bit about how you define that, where the current research is with it? Just give us an overview of the study of resilience.
Right. Well, resilience was originally studied in relationship to children who had severe trauma and who were able to somehow withstand that trauma. Originally, it was thought that these children were not impacted by the trauma. Later, of course, we realized not true at all. They were also impacted, but they somehow were able to recover from it. And this notion of recovery. And so, to a great extent, people think about resilience as the ability to bounce back. It's to come back after a stressful experience. Now, I've redefined resilience in 2 ways. First, I've looked at everything that goes into optimal functioning, what allows us to be at our best, which is, in a sense, the notion of resilience. And I've created this model of resilience that has these 9 components, what I refer to in my book as the 9 pillars of resilience. So that my 9 pillars of resilience defines optimal resilient functioning. And by the way, I will offer for your audience my resilience assessment booklet, which describes my model, but also has a questionnaire that everybody can take, self-score, and get their personal resilience profile along these 9 dimensions to see what are their areas of strength and what are their areas of weakness. But the other part of resilience that I want to emphasize is that resilience should not be considered the ability to bounce back. You don't want to, after a stress, go back to how you were before the stress. Resilience is the ability to bounce forward, where you learn the lessons of every stressful experience, every challenge in your life. And sometimes that means letting go of lessons of childhood, so that when you encounter the next stress, the next challenge, you will handle it better than the last one. So resilience as the ability to bounce forward highlights the notion of a growth mindset, where we want to be thinking about, how do I learn from every experience in my life? How do I let go of lessons that don't serve me? And how do I take on lessons that work better in the present day?
Yeah, I love that, because in so many ways, that's like the therapeutic journey, right? It's like learning about your past, but then moving forward stronger. I think a lot of guys bounce off therapy. I think a lot of therapists also fail because they just stay in the past. You know, they don't say like, now what? And a lot of the male clients, almost every male client I work with, like they get sick of that because they don't want to be a victim, right? They want to be resilient. They want to be strong. They want to move forward in their life.
Yeah, I would say it, the way I would say it is that for most of us, new learning sits on top of the lessons of childhood. And so there's always the struggle between the two. In my approach, in my model, and in my path, we pull out the old lessons by their roots and replace them with the new healthy lessons and really the laws of the universe, the ways that work best for all of us.
Yeah. Do you have an example of that, either from your own personal life or from your clinical work, of a belief system that you had to reprogram?
Yes. I'll give you a very good example that's a very common example, Mark. A lot of people have this feeling of not being enough. And it's a very deep-seated feeling from childhood. One person I worked with, that lesson came from a parent that was unavailable. It wasn't his fault. The parent was depressed and was unavailable to everybody, really, but grew up with this feeling of not being enough. And had done a lot of therapy before coming to me, working on this in all different ways, but still at the core felt that. And new learning and feeling good about himself was there, but the other feeling didn't go away. And so the work there was really to highlight the fact that that early message is not part of your DNA. It's learned. It's deeply learned, but it's still learned. So we begin to create some kind of a separation between that I'm not enough and who I am, and begin to recognize that this is learned, this is separate, and there are good reasons why you learned that. And the other big important piece here is to start fully taking in your goodness, fully taking in the compliments that we hear from others. Most people have difficulty doing that. We have this, and the reason for the difficulty is when we create this psychological wall to protect us from those deeper painful feelings, we're not able to be selective with this wall, unfortunately. So it blocks everything, including taking in compliments. And so it's about how you begin to really own your qualities, your good qualities, and make that the root of who you are and your foundation, your grounding. So that's sort of like the process, and that's a really good example of how a lot of us get stuck in not feeling good enough, not being enough, not feeling okay.
Yeah. Yes. Can you say more about that wall? Because I think almost every guy that I talked to, including myself when I was doing therapy, right, and then my journey, it's like we have that, right? We have a very narrow aperture. We close off everything. We block out everything. There's a lot of guys out there that are feeling numb, cut off by everything, right? They come in like as much because they don't feel, sad when their wife is upset with them, but also because they don't feel happy when they get a promotion or their kids do something good. I think they're almost like zombies, right? I think those walls are really thick for a lot of men out there. So if you could say any more about that, that would be very helpful.
Yes, I'm happy to. And I agree with you completely that that's a very common experience. And so there's a couple of parts to that. One is, as I said, we're blocked off from the deeper feelings. And then we have resistance to going to those feelings. And the resistance is, well, those are painful. Why do I want to bring up painful feelings? I'm trying to get away from those feelings. And the answer is not dealing with them, not noticing them, doesn't make them go away. They're there. And they are impacting you in many different ways. including by maintaining this sort of armoring we have around our feelings. And it creates anxiety because something in life can trigger into those feelings, but because we have such resistance and fear of them, we feel anxious that they may come to the surface. So we're always hiding, we're always trying to protect. So it does take courage to decide to feel those feelings, but it's the only way that you could work through them and then let them go. Okay? And we could work through feelings with people even if they're no longer in our lives, even if they're no longer alive, because what we need to work through is what's inside of us. But when we do that, we start to weaken that armoring. We have less need for that armoring if we touch into those feelings and realize they're not going to kill us. We realize that I'm not going to lose control. I'm not going to go crazy. It's in the process of working with those feelings that we develop self-trust. We develop the trust in ourselves because we see, oh, look at this. I'm going to this difficult place and I'm handling it. And I guarantee, and in my experience, we can all handle it because we titrate that work. We handle the level we can handle, and then we handle a little bit more. But it's in that process of working on those feelings and recognizing they're not catastrophic, recognizing I can handle them, that we begin to develop true confidence in ourselves. That parts the veil of that armoring, and then the positive emotions are more accessible to us as well.
Yeah, amen to that. I think the self-trust is huge. And you talked a bit about, your work in addictions, and I'm in recovery. I've been sober for about 15 years. And that was a big part. The most devastating thing, right, it wasn't even the drugs. It was having no faith in myself, right? Promising that I would do something and then not doing it, right? Or promising that I would use and then using. Like, that is what eroded my entire sense of self, right? The drugs were very secondary to that kind of like ego death, right? Or like psychic erosion that I was experiencing. So like when you talk about that, like, yeah, internal trust, that internal kind of like foundation, that's really critical. Is that a pillar of resilience? Is that a part of something that you want people to build? Is that sense of self?
Absolutely. My first pillar of resilience is our relationship with ourselves and having a healthy relationship. I'll say two things about that. First, again, in terms of pulling out the old from the roots, the old pattern, our old messages, we can say that the voice we hear 24/7 is the spokesperson for the old pattern. That's the voice that's keeping us in line, keeping us guarded, telling us we're not okay, telling us other people are going to be judging us, etc., etc. And in the development of a healthy relationship with ourselves, first, we have to recognize that those messages, again, are not in our DNA, they are learned. And it's up to us now to learn new and healthier messages. One of the pioneers of Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls, said that in therapy, when you're growing up, you swallow all of those messages whole. And when you're in therapy, you start chewing on them. And if they taste bad, you spit them out. Okay? And so for me, the development of a healthy internal voice is by identifying the qualities of a healthy internal voice or a healthy internal parent. And those are coming from a place of love, compassion, acceptance, support, care, and joy. So I tell people, if you're feeling upset, I guarantee you can trace it back to some message you're being given by your existing internal voice. Find that message. It's usually some negative. Oh, people are going to judge you. You're going to make a mistake, etc. And then go to the development and the process of developing a healthy internal voice coming from those qualities I just gave you, and speak from an internal place where you're developing that model of an internal voice. And that's a process that people can engage in throughout their day, throughout their lives. The other point I want to mention that's so important, most of the time people feel, oh my God, look at all I have to do. I have this voice that's toxic. I have to figure out how to get over that. And I have to do this and I have to do that. It reminds me of the patient who goes into the doctor because of stress, chronic stress. And the doctor says, well, you're going to have to get more sleep. You're going to have to stop smoking. You have to do more exercise. You're going to have to stop drinking. And the patient walks out saying, I'm going to have to get a different doctor. But the key and the way I lay this out in my book is that we see the goal is all the ways down the road. And I talk in my book about the path. And the path is defined by my 9 pillars. And so the path is available to everyone every moment of the day. It's right alongside you. And all you have to do is to go to my book and take a few steps described in my book to put you right onto the path so that you can achieve success every day, because you can take steps based on my 9 pillars and the messages in my book to get onto the path every single day. And if you fall off, you just go to the book and find a couple of those steps to take to put you back onto it, so that it's an ongoing learning, training process that you can engage in right here and right now.
Yeah, do you have an example of one of those steps, like a little kind of nugget that a listener could do or they could practice to build more resilience in their life?
I'm sorry, say the first part?
Oh, if you do an example of one of those steps that you could share with the listeners.
Yes, of course. And I've given a few up to this point. And, for example, how you deal with an upset is you trace it back to a message you're giving yourself, and then you shift into that positive voice. That's one way. Another way is my 7th pillar is about being present. The more we're able to be present in our lives, the more we can engage these tools, because we won't be on automatic pilot. And so I suggest to people that you find a cue in your environment that signals to you, take a moment to be present, to notice and be aware of yourself and what's going on around you. And I like to use portals, doorways, because we're always going in and out of doorways, as a cueing system for people to set up. Another is what we talked about before, is doing some kind of recovery practice on a daily basis to help restore the balance between the 2 branches of the nervous system. The next is what I've also talked about, which is having a growth mindset, a positive mindset. That's my 5th pillar of resilience. And the key here is when you notice some shortcoming within yourself. Like if you take my resilience profile and you look at those 9, your responses on these 9 pillars, and you find that one of your low points is physical balance and mastery, my 4th pillar. Instead of just feeling like, oh man, I'm not good at this, you say, okay, how do I learn to get better at it? That's a growth mindset. It's always looking for how you can improve and being persistent in that process. One other key from my 9 pillars, my 6th pillar is emotional balance and mastery. And so we've also talked about this already, and that has to do with the importance of not carrying resentments, not carrying emotional unfinished business we refer to as emotional baggage. You want to work through any feelings that you're carrying. If you're angry at somebody, the only person who's hurting by you being angry at that person is you, because you're carrying that anger. And, earlier I said that a positive emotional state enhances heart rate variability. A negative emotional state, such as anger, resentment, frustration, results in a chaotic heart rate rhythm pattern. So when we're in a negative emotion, we're actually impairing our physiological functioning. And the interesting thing, Mark, if you and I were standing next to each other, and I put an electrode on your scalp to monitor your brain waves, your EEG, I would be able to pick up my heart rate pattern in your brain waves.
Wow, I didn't know that. Is that like a mirror neuron thing?
It's actually more associated with the power of our heartbeat and how it can influence someone who's close to us. So when you walk into a room, it's important to realize that your attitude, if I'm in a positive emotional state, a more of a loving emotional state, I'm going to register one way in someone else's brain versus if I'm frustrated or angry. And, the other person may have two different reactions to you based on your emotional state, and have no idea why they're reacting to you like that.
I didn't know it. That's very cool. I think it puts like a little bit of science to like the idea of vibes, right? Of like, what vibe do you put out?
Exactly.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd like to learn more about that. I want to ask you about motivation, right? So like someone listens to this show, they do it, they love it, they get the book, right? They do it for, call it 30 days. And inevitably there's always a backslide, right? People fall off, they don't maintain the habit. How do you keep people motivated? Because, one thing I've learned during this job is that everything is slow as hell, right? We're talking years of like committed work to really be able to fundamentally change somebody's psyche. How do you stay motivated throughout all this?
Well, that's a very good question, Mark. And when I wrote the book, I was not writing it only to give people information. My goal was to get results. And in fact, all of my work and why I focus so much on people's resistance, my approach is how do I keep people focused on the process or helping them return to the process when they fall off. So earlier I talked about the path. This is part of my motivation to help people in this process. Now, one of the testimonials about my book was by Michael Ovitz, the former founder and creator of CAA and president of Disney. And he said that it's the best handbook for living your optimal life. And I really see my book as a handbook. It's something that you put next to your bed, and every morning you just read 2 or 3 pages and you pick up one idea from it, and that's the thing that you pay attention to that day. And so with this notion of the path, every day people can ask themselves one question: am I on or off the path? And if they're off the path, again, they go to my book and read a couple of these steps they can take, like the ones I've been talking about, that put them back on their path, and then they feel successful. Hey, I was successful today. But I've got a lot of feedback from people that tell me what they appreciate most about the book is that they go back to it time and time again for new and additional information about how to live their best life.
Yeah, I like that. I think it like leverages the idea of streaks, right? Like people get used to winning and they love winning. So if you can just have that, you know, like, yeah, I'm on the path today, I'm on the path today, I'm on the path today, you kind of get that win more method going on, which I imagine is quite motivating for people.
Yeah, and one person said to me, one of my challenges is that I fail a lot at what I try doing. And what was different about working with my book is they feel like they are succeeding, because even when they stop using it for maybe a week or 2 weeks, they'll come back to it and they'll pick up where they left off, and they'll feel like, hey, I'm really succeeding at this because this is making a difference in my life.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I want to pivot a little bit. We were talking a little about the show. You got Alex Gray, print behind you, and you talked about a podcast coming out called Quantum Leadership. So I just wonder, like, is there a psychedelic component to this? Is there a new age component to this? Like, how do you bring in those types of ideas into your work on resilience?
Well, I've been fascinated by quantum physics. And what's fascinating about it is it describes a whole different reality than we're used to.
Yeah.
But it describes a different reality that I think is so important to all of us. And just taking a couple of the notions of quantum physics. Number one, the observer influences what's observed. We learn in science that when we do a research study that the observer has to be totally independent of what they are observing to not influence. And yet we're learning from quantum physics that that's impossible. We're learning from quantum physics that you can't look at something without it affecting what you're looking at. So that's one concept that I've been extrapolating to real world. And the second one is entanglement. And entanglement has to do with objects at tremendously great distances who react simultaneously to a situation. Now, how is that possible? In my world, the way that that's possible is if we define the universe as a conscious universe. That a materialistic universe doesn't answer those questions, and really, quite frankly, doesn't answer other questions, like science has no answer for infinity, for example. And so it validates, or it gives evidence for what I've believed for a long time, that the foundation of the universe is consciousness. And if that's the case, it can be empowering for all of us. Because the more we strengthen our consciousness, the more we pull the blinds from in front of our eyes, the more we heal the wounds of our childhood, the more present we are, the more effective we are in life. So quantum leadership, my podcast that will start in January, is about world-class leaders who are demonstrating, if not quantum leadership, they are demonstrating factors that enhance some of these other concepts. For example, the more you heal your wounds, the less unconscious you are, and the more your intentions are going to serve the most people. So it's this line of thinking that I'm looking forward to exploring with world-class leaders.
That's very cool. Yeah, I'm excited to listen to it. Do you have any guests lined up for the show?
I have about 24.
Okay. Anyone you'd be willing to share?
Well, you may not know them. Marcello Palazzi is a entrepreneur and corporate leader out of Europe, and he's formed an organization designed to support corporations. He calls it B Corps, that are benefit corporations that are designed to expand their constituencies, not just their stockholders, but expand their constituencies to include the customer, the employees, the community, and the environment. So that's an example. George Logothetis is the CEO of a very large conglomerate called Libra Group. And he is brilliant in a way of recognizing how corporations need to be sensitive to other issues, again, other than just the bottom line. So those are a couple.
Those sound really good. And I love the idea of the B Corp. I lived in Boulder, Colorado, and there's a lot of those out here of people that are trying to be, more conscious, more ethical, not just entirely profit driven. So I think like the more of that we have out there, and the better we're going to be, right? We're going to heal our planet, hopefully.
Yeah. And one thing that's so important to realize is that these companies that have this greater focus are actually doing better in growing the bottom line as well.
Yeah. It's kind of we talked about before of the psychological work, right? It's like if you spend the time to do it, you'll be more efficient and effective overall, even though it might initially seem very counterproductive.
Right.
Yeah. So you talk about, I'm going to go a little bit, more quantum with you, right? You talk about people that have chronic stress. We talked about that, right? And Eckhart Tolle says that people have this like pain body that they carry around with them. It's their physical traumas, their emotional traumas, maybe sexual traumas, right? But it's like this kind of like energetic vibe, right? That people carry around. And his idea is like, if you're still in your pain body, you're going to attract other painful people into your life, right? The pain bodies want to resonate. They want to kind of like move together, right? So I'm curious for you, one, do you believe in that idea? And two, can resilience be a way to start to shed some of these layers of tension and pain that I know a lot of people carry around with them?
I agree, but for different reasons.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that if you don't learn the lessons of childhood, you will keep repeating the same mistakes. So if you, for example, many of the people that I work with find that new relationships turn out to be just as painful as the old relationships, that the new people betray them just like the old people betrayed them. Now, one of the concepts of therapy comes from me, from this notion of the Gestalt process. Gestalt means whole. It's a concept from the German school of psychology, Gestalt psychology. And they did an interesting experiment. They divided a group into two groups. In one group, they had sit down and have a 5-course dinner, and then they showed them an abstract painting. The other group, they deprived the food for 5 hours and showed them the identical abstract painting. Those in the deprived group, every single one of them found something related to food in that painting. The group that had the 5-course meal, not a single one of them found something related to food. And their conclusion there is that we are designed to want to finish anything that's left unfinished, that the unfinished business leads to a drive to completion. And that unfinished business could be a need that wasn't met in childhood. But because we have this need to finish what was unfinished in childhood, when we do it from a place of unconsciousness, we look for people similar to the people of our childhood to get that resolution. But of course, if they are similar, they're going to have the same shortcomings and have the same inability to meet our needs. And so we keep repeating those patterns. You have to go through the understanding, the work, the healing in order to let go of the old, so that now when you go out to get your needs met, you're doing it in a much healthier way, and you actually find people who are capable of meeting your needs.
Yeah. And that's really well said. And what I want to underline for our listeners is that the healing often involves pain to begin with. Similarly, if you're someone that has been sedentary or very tight, you start to work out, you're going to feel pain first and foremost because where your body is. And I think a lot of guys bounce off of therapy because those first, 6 months to a year, it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of sadness. It's a lot of like repressed emotions. I mean, some of the stuff you were talking about before, it's stuff that's behind the wall. So I guess my question for you is, what would you say to somebody who is just beginning this journey, or maybe is on the fence and might be afraid of digging up those old pains and those old patterns, right? Like why? What was the point of all this?
The first thing I would say is anybody coming to me is coming to me because they are already experiencing pain. Now, it's strange, and I've had a client just today who I was talking about this very thing, because we stay in familiar pain in order to avoid the unknown pain. Now, staying with the familiar pain, the discomfort, the anxiety, the fears, it's never going to get you where you want to get to. It's a dead end. So if you really want true happiness, and you really want to know the true you, who you are, you have to do this work. But I will add one thing here about pain. My experience is that when you accept what is, the pain that is. Now, in terms of the people that you're referring to, we're not eliminating pain by not paying attention to it and not working on it. We're just covering it up, and then it's festering inside, causing other kind of damage. So that's why you deal with it, to let go of it so it doesn't continue to affect you unconsciously. My own experience in my own therapy process was that when I came from this place of acceptance, this is what I need to do for my own healing, the pain felt less negative. When I let go of judgments, oh, this is bad, this is terrible, this is awful, what I was experiencing, and just decided, let me experience whatever is there, that also reduced the discomfort of what I was experiencing. I will say one more thing about pain. When you open up to feel that pain, it's another investment because you're showing yourself how to open up, which gives you access to your deeper feelings, which results in a greater ability to experience love, a greater ability to experience joy. When you do that, when you work on melting that armoring, you release your body to have greater movement in your body so that your energy moves more readily through your body. That's where you experience the positive feelings of joy and happiness. When you have this armoring, it interferes with that movement of energy in your body.
Yeah, I love that, right? Because that makes you really like a holistic view. And it's more than just the emotional. It's also the spiritual, the energetic, the physical, right? Like it's about that kind of like full state of resonance that here that you
and it's about your health, your physical health as well. So a couple of years ago, I did an assessment of my biological age. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but we now have ways through cell methylation and assessment, we can actually get how quickly or slowly our bodies are actually aging. And so when I did this about 2 years ago, my biological age, and now I wrote my book, I've developed this model based on my own life and what I find is the most beneficial. My biological age came out 20 years younger than my chronological age.
Wow.
And I attribute it to all the things that we're talking about today, all the things that go into my model of resilience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, if you need an endorsement out there, listeners, there's one right there. So, Stephen, thank you again for being on the show. I'm curious, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to pick up the book, where should they go? What should be their next step?
The book is The 9 Pillars of Resilience, The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. It's available in bookstores. It's available online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. My website is drstephensideroff.com. A lot of my articles, a lot of my interviews, a lot of my research and my approach is there. As I said, I have this free resilience assessment booklet. People can go to my website and they can sign up and get that so that they can get their own personal resilience assessment profile. And from that, they know which direction to go in.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks again for being on the show. Your knowledge and experience are very inspiring to me and to our listeners. Listeners, all that stuff that you mentioned is going to be in the show notes, including the free booklet. So check that out. Give it a click. It'll all be there for you to go and explore. And please, send this episode to somebody who you think has a lot of chronic stress, needs to build some resilience. I think there's a lot of great nuggets in this hour episode that could help somebody start along the path that the doctor's talking about, right? I think that's really critical. It takes a lot of, prodding, I think, to get someone to start to move. And I think this could hopefully be one of those stimulations to get them moving forward towards healing. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. If you like the show, do all the social stuff, share, like, subscribe, you know what to do. We're at Men's Therapy Online everywhere, all social medias. menstherapy.online is the website, your go-to place for individual, group, and retreats, by men format, with licensed clinicians and research to back it up. So check us out, share this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week on the episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.